Ready? Okay. Good morning. Pathetic. Good morning. All right, there we go. Welcome to INF5060, What's New in vSphere. My name is Mike Adams, and I'm delighted to be in front of you today on behalf of all the engineers that work so hard on vSphere and vSphere 6 and all the releases that we do. We thank you for coming. I want to basically do one very simple thing today, and that's connect a lot of dots, right? You guys come to VMworld, and we've added a lot of technology over the past couple of years. We've added a lot of information, and it's hard really to gather all of that in one spot. And I do the best that I can to try to make sure that the majority of you who are VI admins have the detail that you need. You're aware of things that are coming up. So I really try to aggregate a lot of the pieces together for you. Usually we do this session a little earlier in the week, so it leads us into other sessions. I didn't have the luxury of doing that this week, but I think it'll give you a good overview of exactly where we're at with vSphere, what we're trying to do in our cloud platform business unit, which is just a fancy word for what I call vSphere and Friends. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about a lot of different components today. Many of you have seen me present before. What I'd like to do is, because we have a lot of material, go through that material without questions, and then we'll take questions toward the end. I will try to stick around as well. I have my cards up here as well, but for those of you who see me present before too, don't laugh. This is my true email address, madams@vmware.com, and you can send me a note. I'm back to the best email address here at the company because we hired a guy in our group, and his name was Creighton Hicks, and he was chicks@vmware.com. But he left a couple of months, or actually a couple of years ago, so I'm back to one of the better email addresses. So if you want to grab a card, great. If not, you know how to get a hold of me at madams@vmware.com. All right, so let's get going. And you will get a copy of these slides. It usually happens about a week or two after the show. I'm happy to send them to you, too. If you want to just send me an email, that's not a problem. Okay, so you've been disclaimed. Woo! And actually, it's funny, on the bottom of these slides, because of the template, it says confidential on every slide. There's nothing that's confidential in this presentation, so feel free to send it out to whomever you like. Even in the tech preview stuff, we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do, so nothing is under wraps now that we've gone through the keynote as of Monday. But basically what we'll do is we'll start with a little high-level context. There were some new architectural pieces that we put into play in February of this year when we launched vSphere 6. We had a launch event over at the Intercontinental, and we shipped vSphere 6 on March 13th of this year. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll have a little bit of recap on 6.0. How many folks actually are already on 6.0 right now? Okay. And how many folks plan maybe within the next 3 months to go to 6.0? All right, and then watch for this. How many people are on 5.5? How many people are using 3.5? Just kidding. Yeah, just kidding. Yeah, there's always one. Yeah. And I know. Yeah, there's some people too in the audience that are going, yeah, I know. I've got it. But we'll talk about that later too, because there's a little bit. I always have a little bit of doom and gloom at the end, just around EOLs that I think you just need to make yourself aware of. So we'll hit 6.0, a little recap there, a little bit around adoption too, so you can see what's going on, where you are. Are you keeping up with the Joneses or not? And you can kind of insert your ideas in there. Update 1, which will be out this quarter, so we will ship Update 1 by the end of September, and I'll show you some key attributes there. I know for a lot of you, due to the software effect, Update 1 is the time for you, and I'm expecting a pretty big move to vSphere 6 now that we will have Update 1 in place by the end of Q3. Also keep in mind that 5.5 Update 3, which we will actually be able to backport some of the capabilities from Update 1 to 6, or 6.0 Update 1, will allow us to get some of those functionalities in 5.5 Update 3. And I'll try to note those as best as I can. I don't have the complete list, but you're in a pretty good spot, I think, to get some of those new capabilities as well. We'll hit pretty hard the tech preview area. Want to talk about cloud native and also the hybrid cloud capabilities, things you really need to be aware of as you move forward. I heard a great tweet, and actually Kit Colbert talked about this on Monday after his session as well. Somebody sent out a tweet that said, if you left before Kit Colbert was done talking, or you missed his session at the end of Monday's keynote, you may be out of a job in 5 years. And it kind of resonated with me just around new things that are always happening. And I think your developers and other people are always coming to you, the admin, to say, I want to run this, or I want to do this. And I really want to prepare you for that advent, because I think it's really going to happen if it hasn't happened already. We'll do a couple of quick hit updates. There are little things that we need to just talk about, things like flings and some other capabilities around Robo and a few other components, but want to make sure that we're aware of those, and we'll just talk about those in a list and kind of bring that together. Want to talk about vSphere and a few other friends, so pieces that I own, integrated OpenStack and the 2.0 version of that will also ship in Q3, but then also the tie-in with Virtual SAN 6.1 and also Site Recovery Manager 6.1. There are some big learnings in there, as well as integration points that I think you need to be aware of, and you should strive to go ahead and seek out while you're here at the show. And then finally, I'll just come up with some additional resources. What's really cool about this session today, I have a session a little bit later today that is an Ask the Experts panel, and it's on vSphere. So if we have questions today that we can't answer or we want more detail than I'm able to give, I actually have INF5174 at 11:30. It'll be up on the 3rd floor, and that will give us a great chance to talk even more about vSphere and also talk to the technical marketing managers as well as a few PMs that I brought together to talk about vSphere. And basically the door is open on that. I'm just going to open up the panel and we're going to go from there. So we're in a really good spot. Let's get going this morning. All right, so this is the new graphic that we introduced around what our world looks like with vSphere and all the other technologies at VMware. I think it's important to just understand, how things are coming together. And I think it's also important for a VI admin to just understand all the different componentries that makes this go, right? So you have all the vSphere components around, the compute area here. But also keep in mind, right, you should be very well aware of what we're doing around things like NSX, also in the storage area, and also at the management layer, right? Those are the next advents for VI admins that are just using our core vSphere product. They've got to think about how they're going to get more out of that core platform, particularly as you grow, right? Having operations management or automation or some of these things that make the network topology easier to handle, or make the storage more simplistic to go ahead and utilize some of the API structures that we've put together. Those things become really, really important. You've also seen us come up with some other pieces. I think for a lot of you, toward the bottom of this, you follow the build it approach. You have very strong folks at your organization. You will go ahead and build an architecture, but keep in mind we have ways of helping you with converged and hyper-converged systems so that you can go ahead and bring these things forward. The biggest announcement here this week is around the Evo SDDC, which is going to be the full meal deal. Last year we talked about Rail, which was just the compute and storage layer. The case of the Evo SDDC, you're going to get into not only compute and storage, but also network, top-of-rack switch management, all these different capabilities that would allow you to stand up a data center in less than 2 hours. That's really the key around that Evo set of technologies, getting you into this picture as quickly as possible. Also remember that traditional app and kind of newer cloud native app, that dynamic also starts to come into play. We'll talk about that in the technology preview, and you saw that on Monday, where we have basically a 2-part strategy around that. Whether you want to go ahead and extend from vSphere, which I think is going to be the play for 90% of you that are here, or you want to go down a new platform that would allow you to get to a different level of scale with containers. In that particular architecture, you're talking about thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of containers, and the world becomes a little bit different when you're developing a true cloud-native architecture. And we'll talk a little bit more about the requirements there, because I think that that's important as well. All right, so let's actually get into this a little bit further. Obviously, we've continued to go down the path of the software-defined data center. This continues to drive every area that we think about when it relates to compute. And you can actually see also the tie-in. We did a lot of very specific tie-ins to the hybrid cloud this year because of the way we see people wanting to adopt or shift toward the public cloud. I think one of the things that's happened is we've been able to take some technologies and really start to think about it from the vSphere perspective, where you guys are at, and think about how do we get to the public cloud, right? So we've had some stuff like vCloud Connector and some other capabilities, but they've done, cold migration, or they haven't had the cleanest interface to allow us to do things on-prem and off-prem in a combined way. And now we're really thinking about these things and starting to bring them into the foray. So let's go ahead and drive through this. and really think also about where we are in relation to vSphere itself, right? And I'm not trying to sell you on the pieces here. The key, though, is just being aware of what we're actually doing and how you can expand what you're doing, okay? So the way to read this chart is, right, there are some core capabilities that we always provide with vSphere, right? You have the core abstraction layer, the resource management, the pooling, all those types of capabilities. And then as you go toward the right, it's really a matter of what is the business priority that you're trying to get after, right? And there may be some newbies here that are just getting into vSphere, so that's why I like to talk about this a little bit. So basically you have, as you move to the right of the vSphere box that's on the left in the deeper blue, you have basically the ways you can go ahead and consume. Okay, so for those of you in the SMB space that have a smaller number of systems, probably up to 3, we have the collection of the Essentials Plus capabilities that would allow you to create islands of virtualization. Okay, that was also the first foray for us into providing robo. And so for some of you larger customers, you may also be looking after robo solutions where you're trying to virtualize at each one of these locations. But first things first, when we talk about the SMB, we have the capability there to basically provide an island of virtualization, and we're ready to go there with the Essentials piece. The Robo piece, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go, because there's some interesting announcements there, it was actually a set of technologies that we further optimized last fall. So prior to that, we had taken the Essentials Plus piece and basically kind of put a Band-Aid on them and said, this applies to the Robo use case. But it really wasn't the best way, right? Because it didn't provide the right feature set that you wanted. It wasn't optimized around the numbers of VMs that you were running. And so we fixed all of that. And I can tell you since September of last year, we've had great adoption of the Robo technologies. So if you're looking to expand the data center out to the Robo environment, I think that that's a really keen thing that you should look after within relation to the Robo SKUs that we have. And also, there's a tech deep dive today on the Robo environment with Rick Turlip, who's one of our key engineering folks and our architectural folks around Robo. He knows more about Robo. He's probably forgotten more about Robo than I'll ever learn. But that's 4790 later on today on 11. It's a Robo tech deep dive if you're into that. But we'll talk a little bit more about enablement with that in the quick hits section. The last two pieces are the pieces I think a lot of you are evolving toward. Okay, so imagine today you're just a core vSphere user and you haven't really evolved where you're trying to go. You may add more vSphere organically, but you don't necessarily expand out in some of the other technologies. So for the one piece, the lighter green that we have there, there is a need for operations capability. Okay, and usually at about 50 VMs and higher, what becomes really important is things like capacity, performance, and health. How do you get that type of information, right? We don't have all that much in vCenter itself. I mean, there is information there, but it would be really nice to have a dashboard that shows me this type of information. So I could understand things like, did you know in 41 days you're going to run out of data store space? Okay, that would be an important piece of information, because if I run out of space, my VMs are going to have a significant problem. Okay, think about flying an airplane without a dashboard or without instrumentation. It doesn't work so well. And so that's why we've seen such a great combination of folks that have gone from vSphere to vSphere with operations management, and it makes sense for them to go ahead and leverage those two technologies together. I think that's one of the first things you're going to run into as you have the ever-expanding virtualization environment with vSphere. The last piece up the top is the vCloud Suite. Obviously, this is the full meal deal, the all-in, and this is for those of you who are really trying to drive toward that larger unified hybrid cloud set of technologies. So putting in the heavier weight capability for DR plus all the management pieces, this would allow you to really expand upon what you're doing. And we've had good success with the vCloud Suite as well. But really two options to think about as you're trying to move forward what you're doing, right? You need levels of management, you need DR, and you need to think about these larger constructs. So I think that that's an important piece. All right, so that's enough of the kind of high-level overview. Let's talk a little bit more specifically around what we're trying to do in relation to vSphere and some of the other technologies that we have and what's really kind of new and driving us. So the first piece you have is around the cloud-native infrastructure and architectures. We think cloud-native applications are going to be a key driver as we move forward. And what I'm going to explain to you as we go through the technology previews is basically what we've been doing on cloud-native is dropping breadcrumbs. Okay, ever since VMworld of last year, we've started to talk about, hey, we should have interaction with these cloud tools. And then we started to talk about maybe we should support some of the OSs around containers. And then we introduced things like Project Lightwave and Project Photon. so the lightweight Linux operating system, and then the security methodology around containers. And really Monday was about bringing this all together, and I'm going to bring it on home for you so you can see what we're really trying to do and what we're up to in relation to cloud native. And so if your developers are not asking you about containers right now, they will be, right? Or they're asking about microservices, they're living in containers. I think many of you are going to come to that sooner rather than later, and so it's a very key perspective for RBU to deliver some of the technologies that will help enable containers. In the middle piece, hybrid cloud, wanting to make sure that we can create the compelling link between the private cloud that you've already set up and the public cloud environment, and some of the new tech previews will talk about cross-cloud vMotion as well as the content sync capability that's really going to enable that. These were part of what was announced as called Project Skyscraper, and there'll be more inside of that as well. There's more things that we want to do to further enable the hybrid cloud use case, particularly with vCloud Air, and then I think as we go longer term, the idea of additional clouds as well. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And then the last piece, obviously making sure that we continue to really work hard on that core virtualization leadership. We need to maintain not only what we're doing, but continue on the accelerator to show innovation in what we're doing. And I think that that's a key driver. That's the thing that excites me about where we're trying to go. Not only are we trying to do these new cool things on the left and the center, but we're also saying, yep, it's not good enough, right? We need to continue to do things that are core to what you're doing, increase usability, and increase footprint there as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more specifically about what we're doing and what we've done with 6.0 this year. So again, 6, we announced it February 2nd and shipped it on March 13th. So we've been going a little over, well, just about 2 quarters now of availability for the product. When the product came out, there were a lot of keen areas, and these are some of the slicker features that you see here, but I want to also talk about the things that are not as well known and the things that may just pique your interest in terms of what we're doing, okay? So obviously the scalability increased, and I have to stand a little closer here. I forgot my context this morning, but 2 to 4x across the platform, depending on what you're looking after. So some of the capabilities for the large-scale VMs, 128-way with 4 terabytes of memory. Usually, if you have a VM of that size, I'm not sure what you're doing with it right now, but obviously it's nice to know that you can do it. But the idea here is that you keep up with the Joneses in terms of what we're doing. You have the ability to go ahead and increase different capabilities. I think one of the most notable in that size increase was the movement from 32 hosts in a cluster to 64. And again, some of you may not do more than 8 or 12, but as you think about these larger environments, the ability to go beyond 32 is just something that's important to have kind of in your wheelhouse. What also happened as a result of having that 32 node go to 64 node in a cluster, we increased the size and capabilities of virtual SAN. So that was a great benefit, kind of a 1-2 punch there. We had a lot of work that we did around NVIDIA Grid and the vGPU, so support of 2D and 3D graphics, particularly for the desktop use case. So that was a key driver. We had introduced that in VMworld last year, but actually delivering on that with vSphere 6. We had also talked about, in relation to Horizon and vSphere, the use of what we called, now call Instant Clone. Last year we talked about it was called Project Fargo. And the idea behind that was to go ahead and instantiate 60 running desktop VMs in under 5 seconds. So we use a forking technology in order to be able to do that. And there's some great blogs around how we actually make Project Fargo go. So definitely take a look at that if you're on the desktop side. That particular set of technology, too, Instant Clone, we'll actually be using that in a lot of different areas. You actually saw a mention of it in the keynote for Cloud Native, so it's able to work there. We'll also be using that to drive some of the Hadoop work that we're doing. So if you're running big data on top of vSphere, you can accelerate how you deploy that as well. So really an enabling technology for us under Instant Clone. Toward the right, some of the bigger pieces that people really liked. So you have the VMotion and the trifecta of VMotion. You have the long distance capability, which was the sexiest one that everybody wanted to talk about. So having over 100 milliseconds in round trip transfer time, allowing us to do a VMotion from California to New York, and then New York across the ocean. A lot of those were really cool. But I think from the perspective of the user, the cooler ones were not having to do more advanced network setup. You could go ahead and have stretched layer 2 in order to go ahead and do that. And then also the vCenter to vCenter VMotion migration. I think that that's more applicable to many of you that have multiple VCs. So I think that that's an important characteristic just to understand. And the further enablement of fault tolerance. So when we first put out fault tolerance in 09, and I remember giving the speech on vSphere 4 at the time, and we were like, fault tolerance, here it is, and you were like, we love it, except it's one vCPU, so that didn't help, right? And now having the support of up to 4 vCPUs is enabling us to meet maybe 60 to 70% of the workloads that you may want to run. For those of you not familiar with fault tolerance, basically it's a VM in the environment that if that goes down, you're going to have a serious problem. Or the better way to think about it is HA on steroids. So you just have a VM that's ready to catch what this VM was doing at the instant I go ahead and lose it. And so now having the up to 4 vCPU support is pretty significant in terms of what we're doing. We will do more in the future. I don't have details on that, but obviously it's important for us to continue to have very good availability stories as you're thinking about how you protect VMs and the different technologies you use. If we move on to the lower right, had some capabilities, obviously in relation to web client, and web client is everybody's favorite topic, and I say it with a smile because we've heard good feedback from you guys, and if you want to let us have it at any point or we want to discuss, that's fine too. Dennis Liu on the PM team is here. He actually gave a great session on what they're doing around web client, and I think he's done a bang-up job around that. But when we looked at web client, really there were 2 major problems that we've solved with version 6, and then update 1 even makes that better. You have the performance problem, and then you have what I call the who moved my cheese problem, okay? So the performance problem is pretty easy, right? I need the web client to go faster. I need to have live refresh. I need to have just better overall performance, okay? The second problem is the who moved my cheese is, can we fix things like, flattening out menus? Can we go ahead and have less than 3 clicks in order to go across the screen to do something that may have taken me 1 click previously in the C# client? And so now I think you'll see a noted improvement in both of those areas. So if you haven't given web client a shout, I think it's definitely time to go ahead and do that. In fact, I would challenge you, if you think about web client, and I've seen this with a number of users, give it 2 weeks to a month. Just try it. Try it every day for 2 weeks to a month and see where you're at. Because I've read so many reviews of folks that said, you know what, after I just kind of got into that world and got into that mindset, it made a lot more sense to me, and I can see the reasons behind it. And remember, web client, more objects that we can go ahead and manage. That's one of the reasons we did it. Also, more concurrent access points into the environment itself, right? So C# was limiting us from both of those perspectives, and so the web client is the way to go. It is the future of what we're doing, and it is the only fully functioning GUI within the environment. And it's going to get even better with update 1 around Update Manager, and I won't steal my thunder there. One other piece around that simplified management, we introduced something called Content Library. This was a piece we talked about in relation to vCloud Director. What Content Library allowed you to do was take things like VM templates and ISO files and other pieces that you wanted to share amongst multiple environments. You could go ahead and have this shared repository. So basically, we would replicate all that information between the different organizations, and you would go ahead and have a usability function that said, yep, I don't have to reinvent the wheel in order to share these unique assets in the environment. This is also the basis for the tech preview in the hybrid cloud demo that you saw on Monday, where we talk about content sync. That's based off of having Content Library in place. And the last piece around choice, we did introduce integrated OpenStack 1.0 that came out also in February. We announced in February, shipped in March. We've had over 1,000 customers touch this so far and are working on some of the references that we have. We made a few of those public at OpenStack Summit a little earlier in the year. But really for me, when I talk to most vSphere customers, there are 2 comments that come up every time. Tell me what you're doing on containers. Tell me what you're doing around OpenStack, right? It doesn't mean that everybody's driving down those paths, but they need to be aware of what's going on. So the integrated OpenStack, if you're not familiar, it's a full distribution from VMware to have OpenStack set up. Works with our technologies, not only just vSphere, but also the other pieces in the VMware stack. And for those of you with Enterprise Plus licensing already, or you're about to go there, you have free access to the bits around OpenStack. So that's a key aspect. And remember, there's no charge for that license per se, but if you do want to have support, you can go ahead and optionally get that as well, or you can kind of go it on your own. But we do have a good team of technology advocates, particularly the NSX team, that can help you get that rolling, and that seems to be a good model thus far. Also at the 6.0 timeframe, we started to just talk about containers. If you take vSphere 6 right now, you can run containers, no problem. There's no optimization like we've talked about with the tech previews, but things like supporting CoreOS and their operating system, their lightweight Linux distro, we have the ability to do that, and a few other components, so you can go ahead and run containers if you just want to drop one in to see what would happen. No problem, we can go ahead and do that, and have done that for some period of time. All right, so that's the round out on 6. I did also wanted to mention there's a few other paradigms that are big inside of 6, and I think the one that hits you right in the face is the PSC, what we call the Platform Services Controller, the new implementation for SSO. So when you set up 6.0, it's a different beast than what you saw before, and hopefully easier. You will set up the PSC as a virtual appliance, and once you do that, I think you'll be a lot happier at how we do certificate management, certificate authority, and tie into the architecture overall. So we have a lot of folks that are dedicated to security, people like Mike Foley and others that you can talk to around PSC architectures. We can talk about that at the Ask the Expert session, but I think there's a lot of goodness there in the newer architecture that we have around Platform Services Controller. So of all the things to read about in 6, make sure you're well up to speed on what the Platform Services Controller does and and how it's going to be deployed within your architecture. All right. So in terms of keeping up with the Joneses, we did a survey of vSphere beta customers, and some of you may say, well, that's kind of like asking a barber if your hair is too long, but we wanted to see what they would think about in terms of adoption. So what you're looking at is over the summertime, we asked them, how quickly do you think you'll adopt? And we had, some, I think it was, over 1,000 responses to this. And the key was within 91% said that within a year they would go ahead and deploy vSphere 6. So it looks like some good intention there. And then also we wanted to track a little bit around different features that we thought were important. And you can see, obviously, the heavy hitters that I talked about before, the pieces around VMotion, the web client, FT, all of those were important as well. One piece that's also drawing a lot of interest up here, and I'm curious to know from you guys, the use of vCenter Server Appliance. That is starting to gain a lot of traction. One of the other big things that we did that maybe went under the covers a little bit is we made the appliance and the Windows install of VC exactly the same in terms of size. So they both can support running 10,000 VMs and support more VMs in the inventory. But we also added IPv6 support and also linked mode, which we don't have a dependency on Microsoft Atom anymore. We do a native function for linked mode. But those were the really big problems around the appliance, besides people that may not be as comfortable with the Postgres database underneath. But I think it's important to realize, as we move forward, appliance is going to be, a great way forward for you, not only in terms of simplicity, but speed of deployment. And then you'll see a couple of other things in Update 1 that I think may make this a little bit more attractive than it's been in the past. Just out of curiosity, how many people use the vCenter Server Appliance? Okay. And of those people who have their hands up, keep your hands up for a second. How many use it as, I would say, like a primary, right? It's your primary component. So, if you had spread it out and you had Windows here and maybe you used the vCenter Server Appliance in a pocket. Okay. So a little less in the hands, but still some folks are seeing it. And I think, just, keep in mind that, as we go, it becomes very important to, have the quickest model for deployment, that's simplicity, and then some of the other features. You'll see a lot of features that are specifically tied into that vCenter Server Appliance architecture. I also think that one of the things that was troubling, and I used to get in some of the past years, this is the 6th time I've been able to do this session, folks were wondering about the roadmap around the appliance. And we do have a very firm roadmap in place. We can share that under NDA. But I think that was something that was a little bit of a stickler, because people said, I want to do this, but you're not really helping me as to what you have available. And I think 6 is a good start into this, and then we go forward. Okay, so let's look at what's also been happening in the industry. So we also took a look at not just beta customers, but we actually got a sample size across our entire vSphere base. And what we found in a little over 2 quarters, we've had 30% of our base upgrade to version 6. And that's pretty fast. And I think one of the reasons behind that is, we had about a year beta cycle on vSphere 6, and also I've actually noticed the support requests have gone way down. I tracked it against 5.1, 5.5, even 5.0, and it's about 20% less across the board. So a very strong release from us. It's being adopted very solidly, and less support requests than we've had in previous releases that have come out of the board. I also think you have the impact of, it was the first major release in some 3 years. So that impacts folks. You also can see from some of the history that we have, we've had over 100,000 downloads already of the vSphere 6 product. So in a good spot there, and you can compare yourself against the Joneses. All right, let's talk a little more specifically about vSphere 6.0 Update 1. This will be available by the end of Q3. So basically September we will have this. And what I've done for this purpose is I've lumped together the changes in ESX and also vCenter, so it's just kind of lumped together as all one thing inside of vSphere. Make sure to read the official list when it comes out, but here are some of the highlights. So the first thing around the vCenter server appliance, hopefully you see a theme here. We have a lot of capabilities around easier installation, upgrade, and protection of the environment. So we have a capability with the data protection technology where we can have an assisted backup of the database itself. We can do some protection of the PSC itself. And then we also have an additional set of scripting pieces that would allow you to go ahead and do that upgrade and some of the work that you may need to do to the vCenter server appliance itself. So a lot of really interesting capabilities that we've put into Update 1 around vCenter server. Now the other side of that is the web client itself. So the web client, the performance that you should see should take another good jump. So it was a good jump between 5.5 and 6. Now we'll take an even bigger jump where you should see anywhere from 3 to 5x in terms of performance improvements depending on what you're doing. And then in addition to that, you have the ability to now use Update Manager inside of the web client. No clapping? No, it's a long time coming. But yeah, there we go. Okay, so for the first time, Update Manager hasn't changed in its core guts, right? It does the patching of the hosts, Windows hosts, and the VMs as well. So we'll continue to look after, how we do that and how we make that native, actually even inside the appliance. So we'll talk about that in the future. But this is pretty key for us to bring functionality into that web client. And then in addition to that, some interesting things that we've done for web client. We now have a live update capability or live refresh. Where it will refresh a majority of the activities that you're doing, so to give you some better real-time information. And then there's also something in there called custom attributes, which is basically just a field where you can add notes around what's going on within the web client. So something to take in mind and just keep in mind as you think about this. Also related to, as I was mentioning before, a number of those improvements in speed for the web client were also backported to 5.5 Update 3. So you have the ability to leverage that as well. Also, the fast evacuation times, and this goes from anywhere from 4x to 7x in terms of the performance improvement. But when you do a VMotion and put it in maintenance mode or put a box in maintenance mode, the evacuation time becomes very, very important, particularly as you're starting to pack a lot of VMs into a host. So as you do that, it was very important for us to make sure that those evacuation times were running even faster than they have in the past. And so we've gone ahead and improved the speed there. And again, 4 to 7x, your mileage may vary, but there's a great session by Salil Suri that's talking about upgrading to vSphere 6, and he talks a little bit more about this and shows some of the charts and graphs related to how fast the host evacuation time can actually be. All right. The last piece I mentioned before, a lot has gone into certificate management within vCenter and just vSphere overall. So obviously we realized it was a pain. We've tried to improve that with a platform services controller, and now in Update 1, instead of just using the capability through the command line, you can now use it through the UI. So that becomes a little bit more simplified in order to go ahead and look at. One other thing I wanted to mention too on relation to vCenter Server Appliance. It may sound like a broken record talking about this, but we're actually in the late stages of publishing a paper to actually also show the throughput enhancement that we're able to get just from a pure raw I/O perspective when using the appliance versus the Windows setup. So that paper should be out in very short order, and not only are we able to say, yes, we're going to protect this better and install it better and all these different operational characteristics, but the pure raw speed behind it is there. And in this case, I was talking to Salil about this yesterday. He said we made some really good improvements from 5.5 to 6, but with Update 1, we actually put a 20% bump on top of that. And so the performance, I think, inside a vCenter server appliance with the update 1 is going to be pretty much a hot rod in my estimation. So let me know, and your mileage may vary. One other thing that's also coming out, and there's a couple of sessions that are on this, a new API piece. We call it vSphere APIs for I/O filtering, or we may have called it storage I/O filtering in the past. But we are putting a new API in place to allow third parties to have a deeper integration point with us, just like we've done with VASA or VAI. This is the latest inclination of this. You can see that on the side here you have the third-party data service that ties in with the virtual data service that we offer. And we think that a lot of partners are going to want to do this for host-side caching and also for replication integration. So this new API, the usual suspects will probably apply here. And as folks start to leverage these APIs, they'll let you know, we'll let you know who's on the list. And this should really help us get a deeper level of integration, and then also make sure that these use cases around replication and also caching are more enhanced for what you're trying to do. Okay? All right. So that was update 1. Let's talk a little bit about the tech previews themselves. So in the tech preview world, this was the first piece around containers. So I'm just going to go ahead and build this all the way out. So the idea that we have here is that with containers, your developers are going to come to you on the left and say, I like containers because they're fast, because they're simple, because they're portable. They make my life easier, right? And Docker's really taken that to the next degree, and the integration with Docker Hub and some of these other things that they have. On the right side, though, you say, you know what? If you want to run that workload, fine. But you've got to give me some of the enterprise class capabilities that I know and love to run any workload. And this really isn't a container thing per se. It's more around, hey, how do we make this enterprise class in terms of what we're doing? I need to have security integration and isolation. I need to have network setup that I'm comfortable with. I need to have this idea of storage, a proper storage setup, or data immutability within the environment. I need to look after SLAs that I can basically make sure I can deliver. And then I think one of the most important ones is, can I have a consistent layer of management? Could I use something like vCenter Server to see containers like I see VMs today, right? And that's a really key piece for us. And in the middle tab, what you see here is some of the different breadcrumbs that I was talking about before that we've gone ahead and introduced, right? So we're members of standards bodies, and some of the other pieces around instant clone, the release of Photon and the operating system earlier this year. Those have really helped kind of crystallize around containers, because at VMware we think containers are a really powerful enabler, and we think you guys are going to go down this path. So we wanted to be kind of forefront and center. One particular clarifying note here is the piece around the Photon OS. We introduced Project Photon earlier in the year, the open source lightweight Linux operating system. We're just taking that name and repurposing it a little bit, so now calling that Photon OS specifically, and now obviously including it within some of the packages that we're just about to talk to, but I wanted to make sure people were aware of that. So we have the open source project, and then the packaged versions that will come out with some of the releases. And the piece on the right, many of you are familiar with these because you use them every day, right? You have the integrations with storage and network. Even if you don't use those products, you have the different pieces that come from vSphere. And then also, the only one you may not be as familiar with on the right side is Project Bonneville. That is the secret sauce around enabling storage and network connections. It's basically a framework to run a Docker container and Docker virtual host inside of the vSphere environment and make the container look like the VM and the VM look like the container. And so that's really helping us deliver upon that. And you can also see the key benefits that we get out of this approach. But again, I think we're seeing a lot of folks think about this model and this new kind of level of development, because people are thinking about how do we use software differently. And the way to use software differently is to think about cloud native apps. Particularly if you're running something like a SaaS app, this seems to make a whole lot of sense. The other piece, too, is that I want you to come away with the sense, too, that we're embracing containers not just around compute, but also around other areas of VMware as well. So we didn't make as many announcements in the areas of, let's say, network or storage or management, but we will do that. And this is something that's not just a compute thing, it's an everything thing when it comes to VMware. So we brought all the breadcrumbs together, and the first piece that we talked about here was what we call vSphere integrated containers. Okay? And the idea here, again, remember, for 90% of you, if a developer came to you tomorrow and said, hey, I want to run containers inside of vSphere, obviously we've talked about you can do it. And then with this technology preview, where we're going to go into a private beta starting this quarter. We'll talk more about that as we go, and delivery into next year. You could go ahead and really optimize that environment for the container, right? You deliver the best of what the developer wants, the speed, the lightweight, and the way that you do that is through instant clone. I can go ahead and deliver the containers very quickly. A lot of containers, what ends up happening is it's a fairly transient environment. You want to spin up a great number and then destroy them, or just spin up a large number just in general. We can do that with instant clone. We can go ahead and have that tight integration with Project Bonneville. This is what gives us that ability not to have to re-architect. You saw Kit's demo where he talked about, geez, in the beginning, I can't see the actual container. I can label the host that says Docker host, but I can't see the container itself, and I would really like to be able to see that. It gives me a better sense of what's going on in the environment. So we can go ahead and do that and not cause the rebuild. And then the last piece, the Photon OS, and that's the lightweight Linux operating system. You're talking just a few megabytes in order to go ahead and use that. And generally in the container space, you have this idea of just enough. You saw that actually label, you might have wondered what it was at the keynote. It said JEVM. It basically means just enough VM in order to support this environment. This is just enough operating system in order to make this work, okay? So again, 90% of you, you'll use this, and one of the reasons that you want to use this is you want to leverage the capabilities that you already know. Live migration, load balancing, availability. Those are all the top features of vSphere, and folks want to go ahead and have an ability to basically on-road to cloud native while still maximizing the investment that they have. And that's where integrated containers really comes into play. Now the other side to this, and I'm particularly excited about this slide because it took me forever to find the Turbine Jet Bike. But these actually do exist. They actually have wheels, though. They don't just fly around because I think that would be a dangerous scenario. But anyway, in some cases with some customers, let's say 10 to 20%, I think, of our customer base, there are some different requirements. Okay, so there are different requirements around APIs. You've got developers that want API access, kind of from the northbound perspective, into the infrastructure. And then the IT ops team, you just want to offer those APIs. You want to have a common set. You want to have them make sure that they're quality, and you're able to go with that set. In addition, we've hit on this a couple times, the order and size and magnitude of this environment is going to be something that's different, right? So we're not talking about 10 containers or 100 containers. We're talking about 1,000 containers or maybe 100,000 containers, right? That's an order of magnitude difference. And then the last piece is in this new world of cloud native, there are some things that the cloud native app does natively that we don't need from the infrastructure. Okay, so cloud native apps, they know how to clone themselves. If one of them goes down, it shoots itself, and then it regenerates another piece to actually support that. So we don't need some of the capabilities around availability or load balancing because it's inherently within the cloud native application. So to do this, here is the new project, or the new Photon platform. So again, a completely new platform. We're not extending vSphere in this case. We're laying down a new platform in order to support specifically containers and cloud native applications. Okay, so this is a different approach, and people are thinking about redesigning environments in order to support this level of capability. And when you look at this, it has a rich feature set API. It also has a distributed management control plane and management layer, along with a more streamlined and optimized hypervisor that's based off of ESX, what we call the microvisor. Remember, trying to keep things small and light and very dynamic and fluid within this environment, right? So we hit on the big benefits that we were talking about, the speed, the scale, the size, being able to spin up containers in mere seconds. That becomes really, really important in this environment. Two pieces here. So you have the Photon controller, which allows you to have that distributed management layer. I'll show you an architecture picture in just a second. Also has tie-in with Project Lightwave, which is that security methodology for authentication and understanding within the environment who's doing what and making sure things are trusted and known. And then the Photon machine includes the Photon OS and the microvisor. So if we look at the picture here, basically what we'd be able to do in an environment is you have the controllers here on the right. It's not a one-to-one mapping between the controller and the machine. You'll probably have a handful of controllers, this may be even a little bit large, supporting a very large number of Photon machines. You see the containers there as well. And what will end up happening is through the API structure, you'll go ahead and have a request to run the cluster that you'd like from the pictures that you see on the left there. And then we go ahead and deploy that cluster into the environment that was set up. And generally the folks that are doing this too, usually more the DevOpsy mindset, or someone's a little more closer to the application. I know most of you are familiar with DevOps, or you may be driving toward that. And this is definitely thinking about these agile delivery models, continuous integration, DevOps. This is really trying to provide a layer of technology for you there. So this is always dangerous, but bringing them together on a single slide, but wanted to do it anyway. You have, again, integrated containers on the left, the extension to vSphere, going to make sense for most of you in the feature set that we offer. Also adding to this, continuing to look at this in the form of a perpetual model, how we offer this out to folks. And then the piece on the right, the Photon Platform, smaller set of you probably interested in this. It will provide that new platform layer, hit on those attributes around the APIs and the scale, and then also because of the different nature of this world, we'd probably look at bringing this to market in a subscription model. Okay. Private beta is starting in Q3 for both. We will go ahead and ask our community if they want to be a part of that. If you have a VMware TAM or a SE, please let them know if it's something you're interested in, and ultimately we'll want to deliver that out in next year. Now also tied into this, obviously we have very strong tie-ins with folks like Pivotal. So we want to offer a bundle that we've announced here at the show between Pivotal Cloud Foundry and the Photon Platform. So we'll bring that out together. We've actually offered Pivotal Cloud Foundry with vSphere for a little over 2 years. It provides a platform as a service technology. So if you're doing in-house development of non-packaged apps, a great platform to go ahead and deliver that platform as a service. And now we're extending that to the next degree so that you can go ahead and deliver larger scale and have more flexibility than you've ever had before. And really the drive that I want you to take away here from on cloud native is really the best place to run these cloud native applications is going to be on VMware and containerized apps. And that actually extends in terms of our plans of not only the container piece, but also what we've been doing around big data. We've seen more people start to deploy Hadoop on top of vSphere than ever before. And then obviously we've seen a good interest in our integrated OpenStack offerings as well. I'll mention what's changing with version 2.0. Okay, the other piece of the technology preview was the use of hybrid cloud and really extending what we're doing from a vSphere perspective and providing some additional flexibility and options to customers, right? And usually when you have your stuff that's on-prem, there's a couple of reasons you may want to go out to the public cloud, right? You look in the green and you say, okay, you know what, I want to have a disaster recovery set of capabilities, and I really want to drive that home. That may be a key use case that I have. I may also have a dev test use case as well. I think other people, and this doesn't happen as often, but other people are looking at things like bursting, right? Having a bursting capability where I need additional capacity because I'm an e-commerce site and Christmas is tomorrow, right? That type of activity. You also have a smaller number, but still folks doing this as well, that are using composite applications. So pieces that would live in the cloud and pieces that would live on-prem. That will become more pervasive over time. But really the key piece around this is providing some key benefits that we see in these types of models, okay? So we need to make these models easy to operate so that it's no great shakes for a vSphere admin to go ahead and have resources that sit not only where they're at, but also in the private cloud or the public cloud. And so they're aware of that, and we want to make this as easy to operate as possible. We want to give you flexibility in terms of what you're trying to drive. So that you have the choice when burst scenarios or some of these other use cases come up, it makes sense for you. And the last piece, I think one of the ones that people often talk about, I think this is less so now because public cloud has become obviously more accepted over time and more used, is the idea of the security model and having these strong security models that you know from the vSphere environment and extending them out into this type of architecture. So the two pieces we introduced here were the cross-cloud vMotion and also the content sync. And I'm just going to, because we're running a little out of time here. On the left side, cross-cloud vMotion, again, leveraging the vMotion technology that we've had for some period of time and the better capabilities that we introduced with vSphere 6. So that was a key componentry for us to enable this zero downtime live migration across from the private cloud into the public cloud. And you saw Yanbing go ahead and do this. Today we would do this in the tech preview from the vSphere SDDC environment into a vCloud Air environment. And we'll look at how we can obviously expand that as we go forward. But the key around the technology was enabling this further piece. And this leverages some of the technologies we know around long distance vMotion. Yanbing was talking about Santa Clara to Virginia. And so having that in place gives us a lot more flexibility. The piece on the right is the content sync, so you see the pieces around the VM templates or the ISO files. I not only want to sync those around the private cloud environments that I have, the SDDC1 and SDDC2, but I also want to sync these with my vCloud Air environment as well. And I can go ahead and do that based on this, and this was the technology preview that we introduced around this, around sharing and usability. That's really the key driver here as we think about what we're trying to do here. So again, there'll be more here. We talked about this in a press release called Project Skyscraper. There's more to come when we think about these, but these technology previews that we're thinking about, we think they provide a lot of key value into our customer base, and it should be definitely things that you're thinking about as you think about leveraging vSphere and moving out toward the public cloud. Connecting the dots with some of the vSphere friends, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to make sure we save room for the additional comments and things. Site Recovery Manager 6.1, a lot of new capabilities related to NSX, the support of the Metro cluster environment that they talked about. I think from my perspective, the key ones that I wanted you to look after were the orchestration with the VMotion over distance. So that's a capability now we can leverage in a 1-2 tandem. I did talk about that last year in respect to technology previews. If you have that in place, if you have SRM, basically we can do some piggyback capabilities, and it makes it easier to go ahead and leverage some of those components in conjunction with some of the assisted replication that you're doing as part of SRM. So that's a key piece. Also, all the way to the right, the ability to now have tied into these new protection groups into the storage policy-based management engine allows us to get a little bit more flexibility there too in terms of how we manage the different protection groups and the different storage that we have around them. Similar story for Virtual SAN 6.1. I think a big thing around this was when the first version came out, or the version we talked about last year, it did not support the new FT capabilities, so the new fault tolerance capabilities. It now does that with the 6.1 release. It also has replication built into it as well. And you see some of the other components. There are plenty of sessions on this. I think the key one for me, though, is making sure that FT works correctly with Virtual SAN, and now we have that in place. And I would just take also, heed of the fact that, Virtual SAN has changed totally since its first introduction. It can now support those business critical applications due to the fact that it uses flash along with just the generic disk or the hard disk. So it's important to go ahead and take another look at Virtual SAN because it will save you not only dollars, but also the complexity in terms of the number of clicks that you'd have to deal with in a big time SAN is definitely reduced when you talk about Virtual SAN. Integrated OpenStack 2.0 version will ship this quarter. Again, when we shipped version 1.0, a couple of things that people were just thought, geez, we need to move on here and get this thing going. But it's definitely a 1.0 release. We supported Juno prior, but didn't support Kilo. So now we have Kilo, the latest release of OpenStack. We've also internationalized this and localized it. So the first product was English only. That doesn't help with our colleagues that are around the globe, or if you're from another geography. So we now have additional support there. We're also doing some interesting work with Rackspace to offer the plans for this are coming out, the unified OpenStack architecture that would allow you to get some additional choices when it came to deploying OpenStack. So if you wanted to use a different hypervisor, for example, and still have some integration in a framework where you could make logical choices, you can go ahead and do that as well. And I actually have a slide in the appendix if you want to get more detail. We actually have a lot of folks also on the OpenStack team here at VMworld. We have an easier upgrade path, or an easy upgrade path from the 1.0 version into 2.0, and the ability to roll back should there be a problem. And then also for those of you who buy through the service provider program, or you consume a service through one of our service providers, we now offer the integrated OpenStack distribution through that program as well. That was not applicable a little bit earlier in the year. And then also the Federation hybrid offering, the integrated OpenStack capabilities from us will be a part of that. That's a larger Federation play from EMC and some of our brother and sister companies. Okay, a couple of quick hit capabilities that I wanted to make sure you're aware of. Number one, host client Fling. So many of you are asking questions, and we've talked about this a little bit around the move to HTML5 and trying to do that and trying to make things better from that perspective. Well, one of the things that we've introduced within the last 2 weeks is a host client Fling that you can go ahead and download. Remember, Flings have no official support characteristics to them, so use it with caution. But this has been by far and away the most utilized Fling that we've ever kicked out the door. So that allows you to use this host client from the perspective of what happens if VC goes down and I would need to go ahead and access directly to a vSphere host or to an ESXi host. That's what we use the host client for. So you're not going to use it in a lot of cases, but there are some firm ones that you're going to want to use it. So go ahead and check out the host client Fling. It uses the HTML5 backend that we will at some point bring into the larger vSphere universe, but it should give you a good kind of test road environment just to check things out and see what we're doing. We are committed to going to HTML5. It's just going to take us a little while to do that. We have removed some of the capabilities that we had in the baseline of vSphere around what was called VCOps Foundation. And as we moved into vRealize, and vRealize 6.1 is out this quarter or this coming time as well. But in this particular capability, there was some VCOps kind of base level web and alert information that was baked into vSphere. We've decided that that really wasn't fully functioned anyway, and not a lot of people were using it, so we've simply decided to remove that out. And then the last piece, the remote office, branch office, we did update that along with vSphere 6, so it does include new capabilities like fault tolerance. There are some differences in how the Robo package looks from some of the vSphere packages, so definitely make sure you're aware of what that looks like. And then also at this show, the storage team is announcing that vSAN will have a 2-node configuration that is capable to support a Robo environment. So if you need storage behind the virtualized environment, you don't have, let's say, a small-scale SAN, you can go ahead and deliver this. Remember, normally vSAN is a 3-node minimum setup. There are some restrictions around doing this in the 2-node capability, but it does provide you an option in order to go ahead and do this. One other thing I wanted to also mention too, I don't have any discussion in here about vCloud Director. The last couple of updates I've given a lot of stuff around vCloud Director and the move to vRealize automation and some of the different things that we're doing. If any of you are still going through a vCloud Director migration project or you need a little bit more vCloud Director to tide you over, come talk to me as well, as I'm still involved in those projects, and I know some of you are still looking to see what you're going to do. All right, last couple of minutes here. Some quick things I wanted to remind you. So in the EOAs, the end of availabilities, just some things that are coming up to keep in mind. We'll break this down, ESX first and then vCenter Server. So this is the current list that we have up there. The way to read this is general availability. That's when we stop delivering the SKUs. So make sure you've got a copy of that set of files. And then what you have is what they call end of general support. That's 5 years, where we say, okay, that's when we stop doing telephone support and advanced patches. And then the technical guidance is another 2 years of basically documentation that comes out to support it. The key ones that I want to show you, obviously related to 4.x. You have just a little bit of time left on the tech guidance there, but I think we're pretty well familiar with that. The bigger ones are around 5.0 and 5.1. You can see there in the middle there, August of next year. So this time next year, having the end of official support for 5.0 and 5.1. So ding, ding, ding. Time to take a look at 5.5 or 6. I would imagine that if you're on 5 or 5.1, it would make the most sense to just make the jump to 6 because I think you're going to get a lot of value out of doing that. But keep in mind that some people do like to do jump releases and skip a release or what have you, so I'll leave it up to you. And then the other thing I wanted to just remind you, and it's actually written at the bottom here, 5.5 actually has, we actually inserted an artificial 5 years into that. Artificial sounds kind of negative, maybe I should just say inserted 5 years into that. The reason that we did that is when 5.5 came out, usually what ends up happening is on any of the minor releases, the clock is set by the major release. So the major release came out in 2012. If you release a 5.5 in 2015 or 2014, you only have 2 or 3 years left on the clock. And we didn't want to do that, so we actually have a full 5 years, and that's why you see such a delta between 5.0, 5.1, and also 5.5. So just keep that in mind if you're looking to just, if you move to 5.5 or 6, I think you're in a good spot to basically, understand what's going on here and deal with this. vCenter Server, same type of thing. When we look at what's going on with 5.0, 5.1, and also 5.5, no real changes here. It's basically aligned to what you saw on the ESX component. My key goal to you, though, is just keep these things in mind, right? Think about where you're trying to take this thing, and think about the different life cycles that we have in place. And also think about that, we're really trying to do a lot from the vSphere perspective in terms of the overall life cycle. We want to make it better. Those update 1 enhancements that I showed you, and what we're trying to do as we go forward, if you saw the roadmap deck, you'd see a lot of things around life cycle improvements. All right. Last couple of things just around resources. So obviously there's a lot of things going on here at the show. A couple of things I wanted to introduce you to. So Ask the Experts panel, that will be today at 11:30 up in West 3004. So we can take questions there that are more detailed than probably what I'm able to answer. So that is good for today. Also showing you a little bit around the storage I/O filtering. Those are some of the sessions I thought that were pretty cool. And then also, for you 6.0 fans, as you're thinking about 6.0, we put together a complete webcast series around everything you need to know on how to upgrade to 6. No marketing fluff, all key stuff from our tech marketing and PM team so that you can go ahead and deliver that. There is a blog article out there. Here's the URL here. But there's a blog article out there around vSphere 6.0 upgrade, a webcast series. So if you just look for the vSphere blog, which our team controls, you can get access to this. And we've archived all of the sessions so you can get the latest and greatest detail around how, when, why, and what to upgrade in the environment. So with that, what I just wanted to show you were the key priorities that we talked about. So on Cloud Native, we talked about integrated containers, we talked about the Photon Platform, and then we also talked about integrated OpenStack 2.0. Again, a key driver for us. Keep containers in mind because your developers are going to come to you sooner rather than later. The hybrid cloud capabilities around the tech previews, and then also the final pieces around 6.0, 6.0 Update 1, which will be available this quarter. And then also remember that vSOM, vSphere with Operations Management 6.1, is also releasing. That'll add a new capability around data center capacity planning. And so it's definitely something you'll want to take a look at. All right, what I wanted to do was just remind you to go ahead and fill out your surveys. With that, I'll take some questions as people can come up. But I really wanted to thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of VMworld 2015. Thank you.